All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Meet the Candidate 2023. Tonight's candidate is Dode Barnett, and she is a candidate for MCN National Council seat in the Creek District CA. Dode, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So, I guess to start off with, tell us about yourself and why you're running in this, and then we'll get into your past council experience after that.
Okay, so my name is Dode Barnett. I am from Sapulpa. I grew up there. I graduated high school in 1989. My mom is Phyllis Warrington. My grandparents were George and Lizzie Bruner. I'm Bird Clan, and we grew up in church. So I'm a member of Salt Creek Methodist in Holdenville, and we've been going to the grounds for years now. Although I'm not, a member of any of them, but I do support the grounds, and been camping at Arbiga and at Polecat for years, helping out with camps out there. So, I did serve previously, like you said. I left to recharge, to get some more knowledge, and I'm ready to come back and hit the ground running. One thing I've definitely learned in the last, 5 years, 6 years, is that you can't change things from the outside. You got to be sitting at the table to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
if the people choose me, I will sit at the table. I will represent them proudly, and we'll get some change in things in the right direction.
All righty. Um, in the last election, because you previously ran against the incumbent Joseph Hicks,
Mhm.
and it was in that primary, if I remember correctly, I think it was like you had 29% of the vote, and Dean Hughes had 30%, and then
Mhm.
Joseph had like 31%. It was pretty much neck and neck. What is your strategy in this race to get some more of that votes? Because it's a three-way race for this district again.
Yes. So my strategy is to be visible. So I've been trying, I'm not real tech savvy, y'all. I actually work for a tech center, which is ironic, but I'm trying to have a bigger online presence to communicate with people, here in Oklahoma, in my district and the reservation, and then at large as well. So my online presence is more there than it was last time. And I have, we have all the forums that are coming up. I'm going to send out a mailer soon. I'm not really sure what that's going to look like yet. It's kind of a moving target, you guys. Whenever you run a
Okay.
grassroots campaign, you wait for all your pennies to come in, and then you start figuring out what you can afford, right?
All right.
So that's why I'm really excited about this platform, because I can reach a lot of people at one time, and then it's saved. You guys are archiving these on your
Mm-hmm.
YouTube channels.
Yep.
People can go back, and if you're not watching live, you can watch me later. But so I think too, a lot of people that I've been talking to before I decided to run are frustrated that we have not made a lot of movement in the last 4 years. And I think that the fact that 5 candidates ran unopposed is not a good thing. I think
Mm-hmm.
that it shows some citizens are very disheartened with our government, and that they're ready for some new life to come back into leadership, and get some new energy, some new ideas, and be really good listeners and good stewards and good representatives of who we are as a people.
We've had a question pop up here in the chat while we were talking. Bristow MCN Monitors asks, will you sponsor new legislation for a fair, enforceable, and non negotiable, strong, and visible code of ethics?
There were lots of adjectives in there. I so I was part of a group that worked on ethics policies, stricter ethics policies, whenever I was on council before. And to be honest, we couldn't get any traction with it, right? The National Council is a group that self governs, and in my opinion, there hasn't been a lot of activity there in the self governance area.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that I definitely would be all in with getting some concrete. There's 3 parts to it, right? So the Constitution gives you certain rights in itself, and then you have to back that up with laws. That's where our codes come in. You have to codify the laws to say you can do this, you can't do that. And then not only that part of it, but also the punishments. If you break the law, what are the punishments, right? What are the real world consequences to this?
Mm-hmm.
And then you follow that up with policies and procedures. So I'm all for accountability. I'm all for transparency. If you look at the policies and procedures for the National Council that we have now, which are on their website, by the way, if you go to mcnnc.com, there is under public documents, you can see their policies and procedures. We're not following the policies and procedures now. If we're not following the rules, how do we expect to follow the laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am very much for our elected representatives, no matter who they are, being more accountable to the people, being better representatives, and being held to a higher standard, because we absolutely should be held to a higher standard. So I would sponsor legislation. Sorry, that was a long answer to say yes, I would sponsor
All right.
legislation.
While we were talking there, David Ware posted a question. He asked, please discuss plans for elder housing, not income-based, and long-term care insurance and tribal facilities.
Okay, so there was a lot to unpack there. So elder housing, insurance, and what else?
Yeah, I think he's saying discuss any plans you may have for legislation for elder housing that's not income based,
Okay.
and long-term care for elders, health insurance, and if you have any plans for tribal facilities. Those are basically kind of like three chunks there.
Okay. So I do think that there's a huge need for elder housing overall. I know that the sticky wicket of it is that a lot of our funding, whenever it comes to well, actually, the last time I checked, and I haven't looked at this year's, but up until last year, I know we didn't put any tribal funds towards housing, and all of our housing funds are federal.
Mm-hmm.
So there are strings attached to those. So you have to service a certain area. That's why we can't help people outside the boundaries sometimes with those housing funds, because the other areas are assigned to other tribes to service those areas, because those tribes are getting money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So unless we're going to put some tribal dollars towards housing, it would be kind of difficult to do that. We could rework our housing plan that we currently have, because part of our sovereignty is, yes, we get HUD funds, but we tell HUD how we are going to spend them and use them. And so we do have some autonomy there, but ultimately it does have to be approved by HUD, right? Mm-hmm. So I do think that one of the things that I know Robin mentioned it in her live the other night, but there have been some specific situations where elders are maybe taking care of grandchildren, or maybe, you have more than one elder and you just can't have anybody else living with you whenever you're in elder housing. And so not everybody fits in those boxes. And do I think we can work the housing program better? Absolutely. Part of that, once we get to the elder phase and we're helping house people, that's reactionary. I also want to see us do a lot of outreach and advocacy and information providing and empowering for young families, so that when they're elders, they have homes and they don't have to ask the tribe or anybody else to be housed by us. So I think that we have a lot of opportunity to grow there. But ultimately, any plan of that would come from Chief Hill with the support of the council. And I don't have I wish I had a specific strategy to tell you. I know there are better ways to do it. Tim Goodvoice talked about that as well in his live the other day, where they've actually opened up some grants for elder housing that aren't necessarily income-based and are a little bit outside the box, right? And so I know there's money out there, and I'm not exactly sure how next fiscal year is going to look with the gaming funds being less this calendar year. So we might be looking at a budget shortfall next year. So we're going to have to really dig in and make some good fiscal decisions for next year.
Well, I'm just curious about that. Where do you get that information from?
The quarterly reports.
Well, the NIGC recently published their income based from the last year for all the casinos, and it shows record profits that are way above. It's actually the highest income that the tribes have made since they started recording the income. So, and that's on the
As a
NIG.
collective?
Yeah, it's on the NIGCs. Now it's not split up. It's not divided down to the individual casinos, to see what tribe made one. But for instance, Tulsa, the Tulsa area made $3 billion last year. So
Yeah.
it'd be
And I
something to
think,
check out on that front, because the reports that we get are, from the internal reporting. So,
yeah, the quarterly reports that are on the website, you can
mm-hmm.
go to
Yes.
MvskokeNation.com and look at the quarterly reports. But the quarterly reports so far, the third quarter we're down 5 million. First quarter we were down 4 million. So we're going to have at least a $9 million budget shortfall for next year compared to what we had for this fiscal year. So we
Mm-hmm.
got to start really looking at being good fiduciary stewards and making sure that we're not cutting services and people aren't hurting because of that.
Right. All right, I'm going to go on. We've had a bunch of questions pop in here. We're going to have to go through them kind of fast because we were chatting. Bristow MCN Monitors asks, do you think that anyone seeking elected office with the MCN should have a criminal-free background which includes misdemeanors for a minimum of 10 years?
Constitutionally, the chief and second chief are the only ones who are prohibited from running for office if they have any felony records. Council people can have felony records that are 10 years or older, and we're still allowed to run for council positions. Do I think that should include misdemeanors? I mean, I think you'd have to really specify which misdemeanors. I mean, I don't know. I hate to have a blanket statement because we all know that people of color get targeted more sometimes by law enforcement. And there's some things that sometimes I think we get in these situations that kind of got out of our control, or maybe, were out of our control. So do I want to make a blanket statement saying no council person should be able to run if they have any misdemeanor? Probably not. But it kind of opens up a bigger question. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously you're talking about some of the, charges that have happened over the last year. I do think council people should be held to a higher standard. I do think there should be some type of review process and possible sanctions from the council when those things happen. I do think that those individuals that get arrested should have to apologize and take ownership for the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so do I think, if you're asking me specifically, should council people still be able to get DUIs and serve? No, I don't think so.
Okay. I'm going to move to the next question here. T.Y. Prohl asks, do you support Mvskoke Nation testing the Arkansas River water in the Zinc and Jinx Dam Lake areas inside the Tulsa city limits that currently is not being tested?
If we have the budget for that, sure. I mean, I want to be able to protect our communities, and we have to be able to protect our waterways. That's part of our responsibility as stewards of the land, and it's another way to exercise our sovereignty. So if we have the budget for it and we have the manpower for it, or if there are grants we can get to start doing that, if we're not currently doing that, if we need extra money to make that happen, then I would definitely support that. I want my kids and my grandkids to be able to go to our lakes and waterways and not have to worry about being poisoned.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. The next question is from T.Y. Prohl. He says, do you support a arts and cultural donation similar to the school clothing program? Do you support developing a cultural and historical certification program similar to the language certification?
Okay, so individual citizens getting grants to do art projects, much like the school grants. Is that what he's saying?
I think that's what he's saying, is that there would be. Would you support a donation similar to the school clothing program, where I would assume it would be a citizen that's an artist is looking for a grant?
The thing about whenever we have those programs that allocate money to specific individuals, most of our laws are set up that we have to have receipts turned in for those. And in my experience, a lot of times the receipts don't get turned in. So then there's really no proof that was carried out, what the money was for.
Mm-hmm.
Do I support the arts? Absolutely. I'm a dressmaker. I make Muskogee Creek dresses. I've been in several fashion shows now. I've had some of my pieces appear in New York Fashion Week, collaborating with another artist. And so I absolutely, support the arts. Most of our famous Muskogee artists, I can only afford their prints, but I have a lot of prints supporting our artists like Dana Tiger and Star Hardridge, and I'm incredibly inspired by the arts. So I do think that we should pay more attention to it. I don't know what that looks like. Maybe that looks like more programs. I know they're already doing mentorship programs where artists actually mentor younger artists and, give them the how-tos and tips and encouragement and sounding board for ideas
Mm-hmm.
and those types of programs. But I wouldn't be necessarily opposed to it, but I would want to flesh it out and see exactly what it was and exactly what it would look like.
Okay. How about the cultural and historical certification?
Um, I think isn't that part? I know the language certification is going to be under this new cultural department that they're starting with the
Mm-hmm.
new Secretary of Culture.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be opposed to that. Again, we need to be very careful. I do think that there is a fine line between paying homage to those people, but also we want to be respectful of a lot of our traditional people who know the knowledge. They don't want to be in the spotlight. They don't want to be on a list. They don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be on the website.
Right.
And so I think that to the extent that the artists themselves were comfortable with that, I don't see a problem with it.
Okay. Uh, T.Y. Pearl asks, do you support amending the Constitution to provide marriage equality for all citizens?
We actually, I would support that. We actually would not even have to amend the Constitution to do that. If you read our Constitution actually grants you every right that you have under the U.S. Constitution. So, since same-sex marriage is actually legal under the U.S. Constitution, it's a right that we cannot deny you. Now, do we have a law in the books banning same-sex marriage? Yes, we do, and that law is unconstitutional. It needs to be revoked. All we would need to do is revoke that law, and we would be fine.
Okay.
But because the thing about it, T.Y. Pearl, that you have to realize is that anytime you put anything up for a constitutional vote, that takes a vote of the people, and that takes time. So it's not something that we could do this month, whereas revoking that law would be something that we could do this month. And
Right.
if you ever read our Constitution, the people themselves have a right to propose legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually something citizens could make happen and make happen pretty quick.
Yeah. Alrighty. I'm going to move on down here. Blue asks, what is your views on Creek freedmen being reinstated back onto the rolls as their ancestors were?
My viewpoint is that I support the Constitution, and the Constitution says that citizenship is by Creek blood.
Okay.
A lot of freedmen are Creek by blood. Do I think that there would be workarounds or partnerships possible with freedmen population? Sure. Obviously, we can't explore those right now because there's a lawsuit, but our Constitution says citizenship is Creek by blood.
Okay. T.Y. Prohl asks, do you support amending codes and or the Constitution to allow citizens and employees the right to unionize and collectively bargain?
Again, it's a right you already have. We don't have to allow it in our Constitution. We don't have to allow it in our law. It's a U.S. constitutional right. So as a U.S. citizen, we can't deny you that right. If Muskogee citizens wanted to create unions for labor force, you can do that. There's nothing stopping you.
Okay. Let's go on here. Let's see. Eufaula MCN Monitors asks, and I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, what your position on the current MCN AG regarding her continued representation of the MCN in reference to her being sanctioned and fined for court intimidation?
What do I think about her being sanctioned, or
Well,
what do
I think what he's asking is, if she came up for reconfirmation, are you going to vote yes?
No.
Okay. Let's go on to the next question here. Nicole asks, if elected, do you have any plans on restructuring any of the current cabinet positions?
That would not be the job of the council. That would be the job of Chief Hill.
Okay.
Or maybe if she's asking, like, tell me what you mean by restructuring. But as far as how, like, what the cabinet is structured as and what the chain of command is, that's
Right.
up to Chief Hill.
Well,
That's not the council's job.
and I'll say, Nicole, not to, I'm not being flippant, but um, Miss Barnett's running for a council position. She's not running for chief. So just to clarify for everybody, so she would be voting on legislation. So if you could, if there's a question that you have that we didn't can't we haven't asked, could you just rephrase it a little bit? Maybe we can get it asked. Uh,
Yeah.
Ty Prol asks, should the Council Oak Park be a U.S. and Muskogee National Monument?
Oh, it should definitely be one of our national monuments, right? And I do think it should be protected. One of the things that, um, if you have you ever been there? This is Ty Prol asking.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been there, Ty Prol?
There's such a
Is there
lag.
a delay?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're a couple of minutes behind, or maybe a minute and a half behind us. So
Okay.
just so you know.
So if you've never been to Council Oak, every citizen should go to Council Oak. It's an
Mm-hmm.
absolutely beautiful site. And if you can imagine the buildings not being there, you can just imagine our forebears standing on that hill looking out over the river and hopefully thinking to themselves, we're here, right? We're going to rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
We have our fire and we have our people, and that's all we need to rebuild here in this new place. And but one of the things that I hate that the across the street it's a dog park. Like, people actually come and let their dogs
Right.
poop over there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be for protecting it, and I want to get rid of the dog park. I want to make it an actual, um, more revered place, not some place people take their dogs to poop.
Right. And Ty Pearl says, "Ehe." So
Oh, good. I
he's
mean,
saying
every
yes.
free citizen should go there, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
absolutely. All right, I'm going
Yeah.
to go to the next question here. Marcella Giles asks, "Are you interested in working with restricted landowners for economic opportunities? What do you see as challenges for restricted landowners, such as inheritance?"
Um, I I think anytime we can help our economic development for the tribe, for our citizens, we should be exploring all options. So I would be willing to vet and support ideas that were going to help our communities and our individual families. I do think that sometimes developing on restricted land is a little bit trickier,
Mm-hmm.
whenever, especially if you're talking about financing, because financing looks different if it's restricted land. In a normal situation, if you don't pay your bills, they come and take your stuff, but on restricted land, the bank can't do that.
Right.
So there's a few more hoops to jump through whenever you're talking about restricted land. But anything that helps our economic development and betters our people, I'm all ears.
Okay. Excuse me. We had another question here. Ty Pearl asks, "Do you support the efforts to link Council Oak Park with Dreamkeepers Park and rename the surrounding area the First Nations District in Tulsa?"
I wouldn't be opposed to it. I would want to see who's going to pay for it and how that would affect the historic landmark aspect of making it a landmark.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be opposed to it. I would want to know who would pay for it, and would it be our responsibility to pay for it? Would we upkeep it? What does that look like?
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have another question here. Ty Pearl asks, "What is your position on the porch band, pretendianism, and defendianism?"
As an entity, I mean, I know some porch band citizens, and they are nice people. I do think that the government does not necessarily reflect the actual citizens of that federally recognized tribe, because they are a federally recognized tribe. We can call them pretendians all day, but they're federally recognized pretendians, okay? So they are a federally recognized tribe. As another recognized tribe, at some level, we do need to show some level of decorum and respect for just that status. But, I think that their government, their elected leaders do not reflect the hearts of the people that I personally know that are porch-bound citizens. Do I wish they would stop digging up our ancestors? Yes. Do I wish that we didn't have to be in lawsuits with them continually over the years? Absolutely. Um, do I wish that they had more of our values and for our past and for our history? Absolutely. Those are my thoughts.
Okay. Let's see here. Nicole has rephrased her question. So she's saying, if the chief were to resubmit the same cabinet, would you reconfirm them?
Not all of them. No.
Okay. Do you want to name names?
No.
Oh, all
I mean, I
right.
named one,
Okay.
right? I already
All
said
right.
the AG.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I got you.
the, here's the thing. So I think that one of the things that Chief Hill did well whenever he first came in was he did open up those positions,
Mm-hmm.
whereas some people come in and they've already got their picks.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think we need some fresh faces in our cabinet? Yes, I do. I mean, you have new blood, you have new ideas, you have new experience, and I do think that the AG's office is one of the areas that we probably need to have some change. I
Okay.
mean, we have a lot of court cases that are in adjudication that are not being cleared out. Just this year to date, we have well over 2,000 court cases, felonies, and misdemeanors that we've only been closing about 10% of those cases. And so that's not all on the AG, that's also in the court. I think that we need some extra body, we need some extra judges, we need some extra court dockets, we need
Mm-hmm.
some a lot of attention there if we're going to defend this McGirt decision that we have and defend our sovereignty. We have to be able to adjudicate people in a timely manner and in a consistent and fair manner where people are not questioning why charges get dropped or why people weren't charged at all.
Okay.
So the courts are definitely one of the pain points that we need to settle and to support them and to fix it.
Okay. We're getting close to time here. It's 27 minutes, you guys. So if you guys have more questions that you definitely want to get asked, we can go over 30 minutes. I'm going to basically clear the chat questions that are in there right now. If you think of a question, get it in there. And if it's good, maybe we'll ask it. But we're getting close to the 30-minute mark, just to give you guys a heads up. T.Y. Pearl asks, do you think the current disaster assistance should be increased considering inflation?
I think a lot of our programs need to be increased because of inflation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any of those programs that are reactionary, it just takes us a while to catch up. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
governments and changing those dollar amounts and finding the dollars to change those dollar amounts, it always takes time. And so, do I want to help hurting people as quick as possible and as much as possible? You betcha. I would just have to look at specific numbers and see what is that breaking point of where we can safely afford to get more money in those programs and get them in the right hands quick as possible. Yeah.
Okay. T.Y. Pearl asks, should Muskogee Nation sponsor Tulsa Public Schools as a charter district if the state strips accreditation?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, we probably don't have time for the lag. I would want to know what that looks like. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I don't know. I mean,
Well,
at
if you
some
saw,
level,
right, if you saw ideal legislation come across your desk, or would you craft legislation if that instance came about, right, to try to make that happen?
I wouldn't be opposed to it. But if I mean, clearly Ryan Walters and Governor Stitt have it out for TPS. I just did a training class for TPS like day before yesterday, by the way, and I was thanking everyone there, like, thank you for showing up, thank you for
Mm-hmm.
taking care of our kids. But yeah, so I wouldn't be opposed to it if we had the money, if we had the infrastructure. But when you're talking about the education of our children, that's not something that you can do fly by night. It takes intentionality, it takes money,
Mm-hmm.
and it, you know, in it to make a huge transition like that would take time. And if I mean, considering Governor Stitt's adversarial posture with the tribes, I
Mm-hmm.
don't see us getting approved to take over that school and still have those kids in an accredited school in order to get into colleges. That would be my concern, is that those kids would need to be in accredited schools to get into colleges and to pursue higher education, even transfer other school districts and not have to repeat classes.
Okay. Let's see. The next question is, and we're at 30 minutes. I'm going to try to get these last questions in. I'm going to end with this last one that's on here. T.Y. Pearl asks, do you support the proposed reforms to the Indian Arts and Crafts Act to better protect against pretendianism and defendianism?
Yes, I do think that if you are selling Native American art, that you should be a Native American. And I mean, overall, I think even kind of getting back to the PBCI issue, um, I think that NAGPRA overall needs to be strengthened. And sometimes, unfortunately, we are at odds with other tribes. And so I think that those same protections against other people pretending to be us and destroying our history and our remains and selling our art, I think that needs to extend to other tribes. I see appropriation even just with other tribes, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's things that bleed over. And that are not true to that particular tribe's history. And so I would like to see that strengthened to support our native artisans, because I think there is a huge market, and there's huge benefit to protecting our artists, and because they're the ones that are our history and our record keepers, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
the ones that when we look back and you find those drawings, those photographs, those old ball sticks that maybe you find, you know, whenever your grandparents passed away, or, you know, the all of those little everything that people didn't even think was a big deal at the time, right? That only after that person's gone do we realize the value in it. But I'm definitely all about preserving our history and art and supporting artists for sure.
Alrighty. We got the next question here is T.Y. Pearl asks, is the climate crisis real?
Is the client like is global warming real? Is that what we're asking here?
I think that's what he's asking.
I love it. I love it. You know, I think there's smarter people than me to answer that question. Do I think it's weird that we had some days here in Oklahoma in August that I had to wear a jacket? Yeah. But is global warming real? I mean, maybe it is, maybe it is. And I see lots of studies and lots of articles one way or the other. As long as my kids are happy and healthy and our environment is happy and healthy, you know, where we live, then I'm good.
All right. T.Y. Pearl asks, do you support the ACE program and the Muskogee Education Department?
I do support education. So whenever I was on national council before, I was a member of represented Muskogee Creek Nation as a member of the Tulsa Regional STEM Alliance, and I kept that board for a period even after I left office, because I am a huge advocate for education. I actually helped kind of create. George Tiger in his administration was very gracious and let me help and be really involved. And Dr. Johnson was our Secretary of the Education at the time, and they were very gracious and humble and let me help start our robotics program that we used to have. So I'm a huge proponent of STEM. I am a huge proponent of literacy. I do think that the current resources that we have, we can utilize better to help get our kids a more stable footing in
Mm-hmm.
our K through 12 education to prepare them more for whatever's after that. So whether you go to a technical school or whether you go to a 2-year or 4-year and university or some kind of training program, because if you look at our higher education dollars, we could do it better. A lot of our dollars for higher education, and I don't remember the number now because it's been too long, but a lot of our dollars for higher education actually go to remedial courses because our kids are not ready for college courses. And if we could just reach them in K through 12 and get them ready, we would maximize our dollars. They would be more successful. And as a nation, we would just elevate everyone, So yeah, I'm a huge proponent for education for sure.
All righty. I'm going to wrap on this question because it looks like it's the last one in the chat here. David Ware asks, why are you better than your two opponents?
Ooh, better. I've met Mr. McNack. He seems like a really nice guy. I've met Mr. Hicks. And, I think one of the things that sets me apart is that I've sat at the table before and I know what it takes. So whenever I was on national council for 2 years, I would ask questions, a lot of questions, right? And it really took me almost exactly 2 years to feel like I really had a good, solid footing, to feel like, yes, I can still learn things, but I wasn't still new.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I used to tell people, I'm new, so sorry, forgive me for asking this question.
Mm-hmm.
And I was about 1.5 years in, and some of the more veteran legislators, they said, quit saying you're new, you're not new. And I said, but I still feel new.
Right.
So knowing that first of all, there's no training program for national council, right? You are thrown in the deep end. You jump off the high board and you are in the deep end of the pool. And there's no formal training for national council people. There's really not even a lot of requirements, if you think about it, like educational or experience requirements that we have. And one of the things that I can provide is I can hit the ground running. I've been there. I've done the work. My time on council, the last 2 years I was there, I sponsored more legislation than any other legislator. I work hard. I was actually accused of being a workaholic whenever I was on council before. And so I love our people. I'm excited to serve. And, that's what I bring. I bring energy. I bring a big heart. And I want to see our people succeed. I'm so disappointed that we have such a lack of citizenship right now in our tribe. I'm very disheartened to see that we had 5 candidates run unopposed. I don't think that's healthy for our democracy.
No.
I'm very disheartened to see that from 2021 to 2023, we've only increased our voter registrations by about 129 voters.
Mm-hmm.
That's disheartening. Yeah. And so I think that we have to get people at the table that are going to hit the ground running, work really hard, work for the people. Whether Chief Hill gets elected or if one of the other candidates gets elected, whoever that is, I'll work for the people. And that means working with the chief, right? And if those ideas are good for the people, then we need to be behind those. If they're not good for the people, we need to speak out, right? And also, hold ourselves with dignity, have some decorum, and, be good representatives and live the values that we as Mvskoke people have.
All righty. And I will echo what some of the last comments here are, as they say, Mado. So Mado for being on the program tonight, Dode. For you guys out there, coming up tomorrow is Lahoma Schultz. Dr. Schultz. She is a candidate for principal chief. Her Meet the Candidate is at 6 p.m. So if you have a question for her, tune in at 6. On Monday, the 21st, Sandra Golden is having her Meet the Candidate. She is running for second chief. She is a seated councilman right now, and her Meet the Candidate is at 6 p.m. So if you want to ask her questions, pop in there. We have on the 23rd, Mr. James Jennings, who is a candidate for the Okmulgee seat. He's been on the council in the Okmulgee district in previous years. His Meet the Candidate is at 5:30, so it's a little bit earlier than normal. And then we're still trying to schedule some more candidates. So once we get them scheduled, we'll put them into the thing. And I want to thank you guys for coming in and asking all your questions. And we'll see you guys next time. Mado and Chihichath, Lees.